Good morning, fifth grade. Today we're going to start on chapter 1, lesson 4, which talks about the Great Plains Indians or Native Americans. And this is how did the Great Plains influence the traditions of the people living there? So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so it says grass and sky for miles. The Great Plains region covers a huge area of land that spreads from Canada south to Texas, and from the Rocky Mountains east to North Dakota and South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma. It is mainly made up of hills and flat, grassy stretches of land called prairies. Except near rivers, it is very difficult to grow crops in the Great Plains. Most Native American peoples who lived there could not depend on farming for food. Instead, they followed and hunted the huge herds of buffalo that roamed the prairies. These animals were first called buffalo by early American settlers. The name stuck, but these large cattle-like animals are actually bison. Plains peoples depended on the buffalo for more than just food. Buffalo hides were used to make clothes and shelter. Plains people made ropes, bowls, needles, thread, and tools from other parts of the buffalo. In fact, they had a use for every part of the buffalo. Buffalo were part of the spiritual practice of the Plains peoples. These peoples prepared for each hunt with special ceremonies, and they believed they needed the support of the spirit of the buffalo for the hunt to be successful. Buffalo roam from place to place, so many Plains peoples developed a lifestyle that allowed them to follow the herds. We call these people nomads. So nomadic meaning they move from place to place. They don't just settle. So the picture on the next page is just showing you the buffalo on the Great Plains. And then there is a timeline at the top here. Let's go and talk about that a little bit. So in about 1300, the Native Americans settled the plains. In about the 1500s, horses first come to North America. And we'll talk about how the horses become introduced to North America. And then in the 1600s, the Lakota are pushed westward by competing groups. Let's go ahead and continue with the people of the plains. Native Americans began settling the Great Plains as early as AD 1300. By the 1700s, groups included the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, Sioux, as well as the Pawnee, Cheyenne, Crow, Kiowa, and several others. Some people moved to the region because of drought or a long period without rain in the place where they used to live. Many people lived near rivers, which provided fertile land for them to farm. Others who followed the buffalo were nomads, or people who moved from place to place with no fixed residence. Plains people who traveled usually lived in cone-shaped homes called teepees. These structures consisted of buffalo hide spread across long poles. When the buffalo moved, women collapsed the teepees and set them back up in new places. Those who lived near rivers set up more permanent homes called lodges made of logs, grasses, and dirt. But they also used teepees when they needed to travel to hunt. Let's go ahead and take a look at this map here. So you can kind of see these were the Great Plains. All right, the Native Americans of the plains lived in these areas here. So you can see it's not quite in what we call Illinois yet, but just to the west of us. So you can see the different tribes that lived here: the Blackfoot, the Mandan, Crow, Cheyenne, Osage, Kiowa, the Seminole. So you can just see kind of where this picture is looking at in the whole United States here. The peoples of the Great Plains made their clothing mostly out of buffalo and deer hide. Men of the northern plains wore a shirt, leggings that reached their hips, and moccasins with hard bottoms that would protect their feet on rocky terrain. They also wore a breechcloth, which was a short apron worn around the waist. When the weather grew cold, they would wear high boots and a robe made of buffalo hide. The inside of the robe was covered with fur of the buffalo. In the warmer southern plains, men would leave their upper bodies bare. Some decorated their upper bodies with tattoos. And here's a picture of some of these teepees that you would see. So it would be buffalo hide stretched across these long poles, and they were easy to take down and put back up. All right, let's go ahead and look at this. Did you know about horses? You may have thought that the people of the Great Plains region have been riding horses for thousands of years. Before the 1500s, however, nobody had ridden a horse in North America. Explorers from Spain brought horses to the Americas, and some of the horses escaped. After about 100 years, the horses had traveled up to the Great Plains. There, the Lakota caught and tamed them. After another 100 years, most Native Americans on the plains were using horses to help them hunt buffalo and move their camps. The introduction of horses completely changed the way of life for the plains people. Before they had horses, plains people followed the buffalo on foot. They trained dogs to pull belongings on a special sled called a hoopakin. After the introduction of horses, a person's wealth was measured by the number of horses they owned. The plains women wore long dresses, leggings to the knee, and moccasins. They used the eye teeth of elk to decorate their dresses. Eye teeth are canine teeth on the upper jaw below the eyes. Because each elk had only 2 eye teeth, a dress decorated by a number of eye teeth demonstrated the ability of the hunters in the women's family. Men and women would wear billed caps or fur hats to protect them from both the sun and the cold. More elaborate headdress was used for ceremonial occasions. It sometimes contained eagle feathers. Most of the trade among different plains groups occurred between hunting nomads and agricultural villagers. They traded items such as dried meat and buffalo robes for corn and squash. Trade could take place in 2 places. Nomads sometimes visited villages, and sometimes trade took place at trade fairs. Trade fairs were events held away from villages where villagers and nomads would meet to trade. Members of different groups would ceremonially adopt each other during trades. Because family played such an important role in life on the plains, when people from different groups thought of each other as brothers and sisters, trades went more smoothly. Plains people also developed a form of sign language so that members of groups who did not speak the same language could trade. So you can see here that this woman's dress is decorated with elk teeth, and I'm just going to kind of zoom in on her there. So lots of elk teeth on there, which would have showed that her family was really good. The men in her family were really good at hunting because they were able to continue to get those elk teeth to decorate with. Large quantities of trade goods were transported on bull boats, which were round boats made from buffalo hide and willow reeds. These boats allowed large trade networks to develop. In addition to food and clothing, other traded goods included arrowheads, bowls, and other tools made of fiber, bone, antler, or stone. Before Europeans brought horses to the Americas, large-scale warfare was rare. However, small raiding parties between different groups were common. They sought to steal goods from each other and gain glory by proving their fighting skill. The greatest glory someone could gain in battle was called counting coup. This meant getting close enough to an enemy during battle to touch him without killing him. It was considered a great feat of bravery. After the arrival of Europeans, large battles between groups became more common as they clashed over resources, especially horses. So here is an example of a bull boat, that they would use. Counting coup could be done with either the touch of a hand or a coup stick, and this is considered a coup stick. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at this infographic that talks about life on the plains. There's 2 pages of this, so I'll get to the second page here shortly. So it says, what was life like if you were a Native American on the plains? Your daily activities greatly depended on whether you were a man or a woman. So men were responsible for the boys' education. They could serve as keeper of the people's history and stories. They hunted buffalo and other game, and they fought in wars. Okay, and then boys played games to sharpen their wrestling, hunting, and shooting skills, and they learned the value of courage in battle. And then boys and girls who grew up in native cultures on the Great Plains also had specific roles. For all children, education started early. Usually it consisted of listening to stories and learning songs. So we talked about the men's roles. Now the women's roles, the women were responsible for the girls' education. They scraped the animal hides to make teepees and clothes. They set up and took down teepees. They packed and unpacked belongings when it was time to move. They cooked meals, and in some groups grew corn, sunflowers, beans, and squash. So they would be responsible for the agriculture, the farming, if they were staying in one spot. The girls learned to cook. They sewed doll clothes and toy teepees, and they learned to set up and take down a teepee. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to have you answer the stop and check. So it says, think. How do your experiences compare with the experiences of the children of the Plains people? Which are similar and which are different? So I want you to think about how your experiences are the same and or different from the Plains people and what the girls had to do and what the boys had to do.